correct me if I'm wrong, it is now just full of weeds and coastal wattle because there was no plan put in place. So I think we let sheep in there sometimes, but it is just a dog's breakfast. So the importance of actually having a plan, it's all well and good if the pines are removed, but we actually need to sit down and work out what are we going to do with that area once the pines have gone. So, yeah, again, if we do have to have a motion, I'd like to put in there about engaging in a workshop to actually get the wheels moving, to actually get a master plan in place as well.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, I'd be in favour of delaying the study. I don't disagree. We need to have a study, but I think if we actually got together and thought what we'd like to preserve, what we'd like to develop, and had some consensus, then we don't need to study the bits that we might want to preserve. So that's money that could be saved. I also alluded to Mr. Smart's comment that with the best intention, someone might want to develop it in several X number of years' time, and the study has to be done again, and so there's a cost there. I'd be supportive of a master plan conversation around what can be done in the next decade and beyond, which there's a fair bit of pine forest there. The eastern side of the golf club, everybody that I've been playing golf with for decades has said that land come up, I'd build there, it's prime, it's got pine trees. Generally there's nothing under a pine tree. The area that Councillor Maguire's referring to, there's a 50-metre perimeter for the golf club in the there, but that area is already cleared, so that represents an opportunity for road or some sort of development too. So my thought would be that we would not do the study at the moment, and we would do a master plan to try and get this back up in the next 6 months. Certainly, I think the next 6 months of this year, so we could have some sort of resolution of whether we want to do something up there, and if we do, what it is. Certainly by the second half of
24.
The third quarter by this year. Anyway, my thought would be around that.
Mr. Smart.
Following on from Councillor Turner, so if we undertook a workshop or a number of workshops to gather thoughts and some future discussion around their use, a subset of that can be that we then undertake the survey with some of this information presented within those workshops, including the felling of the pine. So if we bring all that information back, then we can consider the tenure of the land, the boundaries, the planning zones, native title, all the stuff that's been previously presented, which again doesn't prevent you from saying this is what we want to do. It's just the things you have to put aside to enable whatever to happen on that land. But that can include some information brought back to the table to say, well, this is the options on doing the survey as a subset of that master plan, if you're happy with that.
I'd be happy to.
Councillor Dennis.
Yeah.
Suggest that we would like to move a motion that we put a stay on the biological survey for the time being and conduct a series of workshops focusing on the North Parklands and potentials for master plans and other usage.
So in fact, Councillor Dennis, what you wish to say is that that the council undertake workshops in regard to the North Parklands.
Yeah. And postpone. Yeah. We're postponing the study as part of the motion. I thought you said.
Well,
Put a stay.
I think if you're actually doing workshops, you're not actually doing the biological survey. That's the way I sort of took that. But because you are making the decision, we don't have a resolution.
We have instructed the council, our executive, to conduct a survey.
No.
That's correct.
That's right.
We haven't.
So we have.
No.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
So then we'll just pop in there to not conduct a biological survey until further instructed by council.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Got to get a second.
I'll ask for a second. Please.
Secondly, Councillor Grundy.
I'm not going to speak to it, Mayor Ross. Thank you. I think I've said enough.
Councillor Maguire.
A question through the chair to Councillor Dennis. Is there any reason why we couldn't include actually getting the quotes for that survey? Why in with this motion?
terms of reference.
That's,
I would argue that that is probably poor utilisation of our executives' time if we're not intending on conducting.
say, Councillor Dennis, that the council does not conduct a biological survey is quite clear. That means you're not doing it. And then the notion you'd ask for a quote in the same motion is quite contrary to the motion. So adding that in.
I'd say adding, but he could change it.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis.
That's quite succinct.
Okay. Councillor Turner.
Ross, would Councillor Dennis be prepared to make that a little bit more prescriptive, as in something like the Northern Parklands development? I know he had a number of other words in there, but a workshop on the North Parklands, it's not very specific what we're... You made some specific points. I don't know whether you wanted to add those in there, or do you think that's broad?
I think the broadness of it, we all have consensus through our discussions about our intentions or motivations, and I think if we leave it broad, that allows differing opinions about the North Parklands to come forward, whether that be development or conservation or etc. So I think that general.
Thank you, Councillor Turner and Dennis. Any further discussion? There being none, the motion put by Councillor Dennis, seconded Grundy, that the council undertake workshops in relation to the North Parklands and doesn't conduct a biological survey until further notice. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. You'd like to call a division?
Yep.
Councillor Maguire. Thank you. All those people in favour of the motion, please stand. Councillors Crosling, Rayner and Ross. Those against? Councillors Maguire and Goodman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Grundy.
Second item, remuneration tribunal on CEO salaries, subject near and dear to my heart. As written, a fair bit of background in the report. So this is new legislation as part of the local government reforms. In my opinion, as a reaction by the state government to one council having an issue with a CEO contract. But again, I think state government has changed legislation to affect 67 councils when it was one council. Probably not the best way to deal with it, but that's only a matter of opinion. Salaries, whether it be CEOs or public servants, generally have a fair degree of attention from the media, ratepayers, taxpayers, and that's all fair, and all of our salaries are public information. The tribunal, in its own admittance, didn't do a great job in the first determination. All it did was get data on all CEO salaries and set a number of bands, 8 bands, and those bands were based on what we were paid rather than them doing a study, an assessment of what CEOs should be paid, which was the initial intent of it. So they're coming out suggesting they'll have another go. Some of their options to me appear to be complicating. I think one consultancy they suggested was about $350,000 to go through all this. So currently we have bands set by the Remuneration Tribunal for elected member allowances. So I think it's got reasonable support across local government that why don't they use those bands? They're determined on population, size of councils, road networks. That work's already been done. And there's a whole heap of salary information out there by, say, MacArthur Survey and others that are around that give you information on the market for CEO salaries across Australia. Additionally, I believe it's state government probably getting into the operational areas of councils. So councils make the decision who to appoint. council set the position descriptions for CEOs. They perform performance review CEOs and set the scene for what their CEO should do. So it's to a degree going down that level, I think detracts from council's powers to manage its own business. The easy suggestion is that legislation should be removed. Unlikely that will happen. So we probably have to turn our thoughts to having some input into the next review. As I've indicated there, the remuneration, my package fits within the band 7, so that's not an issue for council. But where to go from here? So we have time, and I'm treating it a bit like the elections review, in that if elected members are happy through 2 means, I think, provide feedback to me via email. Also potentially use the CEO review committee, which is sitting at the moment, to provide feedback so I can draft a submission for the March meeting, because they're only due in April. So happy to take questions, thoughts or otherwise on that.
Here they come. Councillor Grundy.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Just regarding page 9, the second to last paragraph, the CEO puts in there a couple of pertinent comments. Really, I'm asking, firstly, would he like to flesh that out a bit? And secondly, is he asking for anything from this meeting?
Thanks, Councillor Grundy. No, not really asking anything from this meeting. It's more information to alert council that the review is happening, and then hopefully provide elected members the opportunity to have some feedback to it. The reason for that comment is the determination. Not sure when they'll make that next determination after this review. Normally goes for 4 years. My contract expires in 2028. So it's likely that the next determination will have an effect on the recruitment of the next CEO by way of what salary will be set. So it could be a positive effect, it could be a negative effect. Don't know what the market forces will be in 4 years, but it can make it challenging depending on what's happening around the state recruiting CEOs.
Councillor Janus.
As Chair of the Committee, I would like to encourage all councillors to contribute. The prescriptive nature of the banding is a hindrance. I think it's our role as councillors, as the board, that recruits our executive to govern, and the market for CEOs is a complex one, and we live in regional South Australia, and if we're going to recruit high quality candidates, we need to have flexibility. All of this legislation limits our power as far as our ability to recruit, and I would encourage each of us to contribute something in support of either, as the CEO said, removing the legislation is probably not on the table, but a broadening of the guidelines to allow flexibility, especially for regional councils that have to recruit out of area and things like that.
Any further questions of Mr. Smart? I asked the question, what would be the likelihood of redacting section 99A of the Act?
We can ask the question in our submission, but then you still go and provide information on, if they say no to that, well, here's our thoughts still. So you can go that way.
Sure. No further questions. Next item, Mr. Smart.
Third item, renewal SA 31 Smith Street, which is the remainder of the rail lands where the Batura silos and storage shed were on. So as you can see by the attachments, the state government goes through a process where it assesses whether the land is surplus to government needs. So they go right through government departments, ask whether there is any need from any other department. Depending on that outcome, they then quite often look at offering that land to councils. Similar process happened with the old TAFE site. As I've indicated in my report, they do offer it to council outside of the normal public sale process, but there are limitations on what you can do with the land. So in this instance, if we chose to still purchase the land, so it wouldn't be given to us, have restrictions that we couldn't then develop the land for any other purposes. So in my opinion, that would make it pointless us purchasing it, because what do you use it for unless you have an established purpose? But adding to that, we did have a phone call from Office for Regional Housing inquiring whether it be suitable for housing. Indicated not, largely around the location and the contamination. One thing, building commercial or light industrial as opposed to housing, and what that would affect. Also within country cabinet, we had a meeting with the minister and other people about the likelihood of new CFS regional HQ and a new police station. We identified that site as a fairly prime site. It's owned by government. We did pose a question at that time of why can't that government transfer it to another department? Apparently that's too difficult. Not sure why, but it's a bureaucratic process to me. So what do I require from council? Any feedback you want to give to Renewal SA, whether we have any interest or not. I'm suggesting we don't at this point in time, and we also suggest we provide feedback to Renewal SA and the Minister on what we could consider better use, i.e. them using the land for regional CFS and police. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Grundy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smart. Look, I agree with the sentiment of the report, and to that end, I'm happy to move a motion at some point. Would you like me to do that now, or would you like to invite further questions?
You don't know.
I'm not certain just yet. Councillor Turner, you had a question?
Exactly the same question. I would have moved a motion now.
In that particular case, Councillor Grundy.
Well, thank you, Mayor Ross. I'd like to move a motion that essentially is the final dot point, which sets out that that council provide feedback to Renew SA and Minister Sockarts on what the Naracoorte-Lismore Council considers better use of the land rather than disposal or sale. Hopefully someone will second it.
Seconder. Councillor Goodman.
Thank you. I don't need to speak to the motion.
Don't need to speak. Further discussion, Councillor Ireland.
Sorry, I was seconding that motion, that's all.
I beg your pardon?
Was there a seconder for that motion?
No, I have a seconder, thank you. Would you like to speak, Councillor Ireland?
No, thank you, Mayor Ross. No, I was just going to add to Councillor Grundy's comments. I was intending to move a motion along the same lines. But yes, certainly that potential for debt to, if it can in any way be pursued, has the potential for use as new regional CFS and possibly a police station. That would be ideal for location down there. And obviously with the contamination of the land due to its prior use, our options are limited.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Any further discussion? There being none, I put the motion of Councillor Grundy's. How have you gone with that? Covers it?
Yep.
All those in favour? Carried, thank you.
And just a number of other meetings and activities, Alan, for your information. Happy to take questions on that as well. The Mayor has also kindly approved some leave for me. I'll be on annual leave next week. Mr Willsmore will be acting CEO. So I encourage you to have a lot of CEO questions for next week. And the first week of April, Mr McCross will be in the chair, so I also encourage the same in that week.
Would someone like to move that the Chief Executive's report be Councillor Turner, Councillor Downward, all those in favour? Carried, thank you. Key projects, Mr Willsmore.
Thank you. Just wanted to add, since writing this report, we've undertaken the asphalt and sealing works, the Rattenbully Road intersection, and have started some pre-works loading of materials for some works at the McDonald Street Bridge to preventative maintenance work there for undermining of the piers. Happy to take questions on the report.
Any questions for Mr Willsmore? Thank you, Mr Willsmore. Financial report, item 11. Ms Edmonds.
Thank Thank you, Mayor Ross. Nothing further to add. Happy to take questions if you have any.
How do you consider our financial position at the moment, Ms Edmonds?
That's not a question. No, I think it's going okay. The budget review that is addressed in a further report gives us sort of that cash position moving forward that we're looking at this point in time. We also have 4 months left of the calendar year, so.
On target.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms Edmonds. Any questions for Ms Edmonds?
Oh, sorry.
None. Budget review, item 11.2. Is there anything to add, Ms Edmonds?
No, apologies for not standing up before when I answered the question. Thank you for Paul for bringing it. Anyway, so as far as the budget review goes, we've got a lot of information in the attachments there. Happy to take any questions. Potentially they'll be unnoticed though if you are looking for detail. So.
Thank you, Ms Edmonds. Councillors, please ensure that at any time you have any questions around finance that you approach Ms Edmonds, and she's more than happy to address any of your concerns. Okay, 11.3, sale of land for non-payment of rates.
Thank you again. Relatively self-explanatory. We're at the tail end of the process now. This report really is a formality as far as having to have that recommendation adopted so that the official documentation can be signed off by Council, by CEO and Mayor. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Edmonds. It looks like a good result from my perspective. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Councillor Maguire, Councillor Turner. Any further discussion? There being none, I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. 12.2, CEO Recruitment, Performance Review, Remuneration Committee. Someone like to move to that effect? Councillor Turner. Does anyone like to second that? Councillor Dennis. Any discussion? Councillor Dennis.
Quickly, very general, because we conduct our business in confidence at this stage, but we are progressing, and there'll be some information provided to councillors over the next month that I'd really encourage you to engage with, and I'll be probably in touch with each of the councillors in person as well, either that's in person or over the phone. So you'll just see some information coming out of the committee, and it's always really important to be engaged, and look forward to hearing what you have to say, and yeah, fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Any further questions? Being none, I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. 12.2, Naracoorte Regional Livestock Exchange. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Grundy.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. On the back of that, of moving that motion, I just thought I'd take the chance to highlight some of those aspects of the meeting. So on the 31st of January, we had our meeting, and some of the key points out of that meeting were that sheep and cattle numbers are similar to the 5-year average. Sheep and cattle combined gross sales for 23-24 was approximately $90 million. Cattle receivable ramps have been completed. The state government sheep electronic identification requirements for industry, including sale yards, is not yet clear with reference to funding and timing. The NRLE is regularly audited by way of the NSQA internal and external audit. The most recent audit took place on the 18th of January 2024, where the NRLE received 100% pass. The auditor went on to compliment the NRLE on the cleanliness of the yards and venue and record keeping from the NRLE staff, and local agents. And I'm pleased to report that Mr Willsmore and Mr Smart confirmed there are no problems with the running of the facility at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. Councillor Ireland?
I was just wishing to second that.
Councillor Ireland seconds the motion. Any further questions? I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried, thank you very much. Item 12.3, Audit and Risk Committee. Someone like to move that the Councillor Ross, the meeting minutes are good. A seconder, please. Councillor Turner. Any discussion? All those in favour? Carried, thank you. I have a recommendation before Council that Council endorses the budget review ending 30 June 24 as at 31 January 24. Someone like to move to that effect? Councillor Ross? Councillor Crosling, second. Is there any discussion? There being none, I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. Finally, the reports relating to the performance of the Naracoorte Regional Livestock Exchange be received and noted. Would someone like to move to that effect? Councillor Grundy, Councillor Ross, seconded. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Carried. Reports for decision. Item 13.1.
Thank you, Mayor Ross.
Councillor Edmonds. Not Councillor
Councillor.
Edmonds.
Relatively self-explanatory. I just noted there the points of note as far as they're looking at a 3-year lease in comparison to relatively longer-term leases traditionally that we look at. As you're aware, there had been the previous discussions around transfer of ownership of the building, which we'll be looking at 6 months prior to the expiration of the lease of that building again. But I guess, as noted there, ultimately any future lease, use, sale or upgrade of the building rests with the elected members, so that will all be addressed again prior to expiration of that lease.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions around, has anyone read the draft lease document? Any questions around the lease document? Councillor Grundy?
Ross, look, it's maybe premature, but I think in our previous discussion we alluded to the fact that in the event that it was sold, given that it's a community building, there may have been an encumbrance on the title which might have talked about where the proceeds went. But given that that discussion might take place in 2 years and 3 months' time, we probably don't have to concentrate on that. But I note that it's not noted in the lease.
Any discussion? Would someone like to move that the council propose the lease? Is that right?
Approves the lease.
Yep. So would someone like to move that the council propose the lease to link Councillor Goodman, Councillor Dennis? Any further discussion? No. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much.
Who was that?
Councillor Goodman and Councillor Dennis. Second. And carried.
Like that. You happy with that motion?
Yes. Carried. Policy review. Code of practice for council meetings 13.2. I'd ask permission for the council to move out of meeting procedure. Thank you very much. So, as you can see in the report, I've asked for some changes. My position is very clear in regard to the first item, in regard to the welcome. The welcome I see as being a simple welcome, and I had this discussion and around the local government handbook on these matters. And as I explain within the text, a welcome can be a simple thing like a welcome, or it could be a pledge, or it could be anything you want it to be. And as I explain within it, that I think a welcome should be a simple, inclusive statement for us as we move forward. Within this policy, I'd just like to break it down perhaps into 6 separate parts. So one, we can deal with the welcome. We could also deal with written reports, which might be an issue for some. We can also talk about Regulation 12.9, which was varied some time in a previous council, whereby you didn't have to speak to a motion when you put it, but the regulations within the Act actually state quite clearly that you must, if you wish to, speak to the motion that you put, but that doesn't preclude you from actually doing a summary at the end. So that would be the situation. We would remove that variance and go back to the actual, because that's a variation to Regulation 12. So we'd go back to the standard regulation. In regard to questions without notice, I'd be happy to have a debate on that. I'm also happy to remove that. Questions without notice are a discretionary thing that the Mayor has. Within the document we have, basically I was giving the members guidance in regard to questions without notice, without saying that I wouldn't take questions without notice carte blanche. So I'm happy to remove that if that's how members feel. I do concur with Mr Smart's 1.6 in regard to the 2-hour limit before we need to get up and stand and wriggle our feet. We've had meetings that go less than 2 hours, and we have had some meetings that have gone 2.5 hours, and I think that sometimes, I'm pretty sure that we can cope with 2.5 hours at this time of the day. Maybe if it was later at night, there may be a need then after a full day's work. If we started a meeting at 8 o'clock at night and we actually got to 10, I know in some government circles, if you get to 10 o'clock, it's absolutely time out. So I'm happy for that change there. And there's also item 6 for me within this proposal is the receipt of agendas coming out 6 clear days and either 3 or 4 clear days. And we just wanted to get an understanding whether the members are still happy receiving their agendas in that time frame, or whether they'd like it more, which might be problematic, or whether they'd like it less. But at the moment it stands at 6 and 4 and 3 respectively. Councillor Dennis.
I would like to support the change to the pledge. I would like to support the 2-hour concept. Also, I do like the notion of the Mayor having the discretion around the questions without notice and the questions and the motions without notice, rather than eradicating them as a mechanism to conduct meetings. I think the current system we're using, which is at your discretion, which I'm quite comfortable with that. I've never thought it was a good mechanism for getting things done. However, in the event of a situation that was probably controversial, or I think there's some discretion there that I'm really comfortable with the Mayor continuing to exercise that discretion. And the final point is that's the I've lost my face. What's the other one? Sorry, Mayor. We're doing it's the written report. I do support. I think councillors, with the exception of tonight where members were overseas, I think there's a bit of wriggle room there for written reports to come to council if you're wishing to table a report. I think that's working really well as well. So
thank you, Councillor Dennis. And what we're doing is just formalising that within the policy. because, you know, written reports from members isn't a requirement, so it's just formalising that. A further discussion? Yep.
I agree that both the prayer and the acknowledgement in their current forms no longer adequately reflect our council area, our business and activities, or our people and community, and that updating them could be a good and unifying exercise. However, I am concerned at the suggestion that we remove them to be replaced with a single sentence that I don't feel reflects both our rich history or speaks to how we realise our opportunities for the future. I think the current prayer is not religious in tone or content, but it does serve as an important reminder to us as elected members and to the constituents that we represent, the important job that we're elected to do. And there is a lot of value in having our intentions and expectations articulated at the top of a decision-making meeting, and I would advocate strongly that we retain something similar. Maybe we should rename it as a pledge rather than a prayer, but either way, these statements are meaningful and they are a humbling reminder of the outcomes that we get to influence, the people that we represent, and the behaviour that's expected of us in this chamber. An acknowledgement of country is an adaptation of the Welcome to Country, which is a tradition that is practiced by the oldest continuous living culture on our planet, which is the First Nations people of Australia. It's become widely used as a reconciliation practice, and it's been helpful in increasing awareness and understanding of First Nations people of our area, but it has become a standardised and formulaic statement that many people feel has become a tick box exercise. And I mean 100%. If you use it in a tick box way, that's exactly what it is. But it has the power to be much more than that. And when it's done in a way that's reflective of the culture and tradition from which it was adapted, it provides a lot of opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate the land on which we live, that we're meeting here tonight in the Naracoorte-Lucindale Council area. It provides us the opportunity to recognise our role in managing and caring for country, to understand our history and the way that we make decisions and look after and look to the future. And it provides us the opportunity to include and recognise people who have lived here, who do live here, and who continue to look after this country and each other. So it does upset me when in the community and more broadly I hear people say that acknowledgements are exclusive or divisive, because this is the exact opposite of the traditions from which it originated. It's actually a unifying custom from our First Nations people that celebrates this land that is unique to our place and can't be represented anywhere else. The land of the Naracoorte-Lucindale Council, which is the karst cave systems, the internationally recognised wetlands, the abundant and fresh water, and the deep and productive soils that support the livelihoods and lifestyles that are central to how we live and do business here, and we should acknowledge and celebrate that. So, it is also, in its traditional sense, a reminder of the protocols and rules of the land, and that, again, if we are brave enough to individualise it, those of our council area. And all of those things are exactly the things that council is here to do, and so we should be embracing that and accepting the challenge of crafting an acknowledgement that is representative of our unique and special place in country, the people who have cared and nurtured it and those who continue to do so, and the aspirations of our community. So I hope that council does take that challenge on, and that we retain an acknowledgement that reflects our history, our future, our people and place.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman. We're out of meeting procedure here, so there's an opportunity to speak clearly. Yep. Councillor Ireland.
Look, just to add to that, as far as that prayer and acknowledgement of country goes, I mean, there's been for the last 12 months, I've been thinking that it is missing out quite a lot of the information we need to, and I believe, contrary to Councillor Goodman, it is quite divisive in a way. I mean, we've got an absence of the recognition of those that have defended our country and the forebearers of the fantastic nation that exists today. And I just think that we don't need to be stating this at every meeting. We don't need to have it even more drawn out than what it is at this point. So I think simplifying it, somewhat as you put down in the agenda, I think is perhaps a great direction.
Oh,
You go.
there you go. Okay.
Go.
Ladies first.
Handsome bald man first. Off you go.
Otherwise, I'll pull it out of meeting procedure and we'll go back into the general meeting. So, Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do like the change. Most people I speak to are frustrated with the amount of welcome to country that actually they have to participate in. I have attended some with traditional people, and I've loved it. I've felt the emotion, but there is a time and a place. You speak to people that are attending meetings, and they can be actually hearing acknowledgement to country 5 or 6 times in the one evening. I think it's. I agree with Councillor Ireland. Personally, I feel it is divisive. I think Naracoorte has so much more than just that. I mean, if you look at the ABC program that was on just recently, and you actually look at our multicultural community, all of that should be acknowledged. The hard work of our fathers and grandfathers should be acknowledged. So I am in favour of changing it, and although I probably think this needs a little bit of work, I think the Mayor is on the right track.
Councillor Grundy?
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Yes, look, I agree with the proposed change. As a council, we should be about looking forward and acting with integrity to hopefully see a continued improvement in outcomes for all of our residents and ratepayers. My feedback is that this proposed change is overwhelmingly supported by the vast majority of our residents in Naracoorte and Lucindale, and so I think that's an excellent idea. As far as the questions without notice, I'm happy if that's parked. I think that should remain. And as far as the agendas, I'm very happy with having 6 clear days for the agenda to be provided to us as councillors. Gives us time to actually do some research if we need to. So they're my positions on 13.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. Councillor Downwood?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to also say that I'm more than in favour of the proposed change. It's quite succinct in what it says. It's short, sharp, to the point. It acknowledges the complex history of the region and what we're looking to do in the future. So it's sort of, without having to have a diatribe, it's short and sharp, does it beautifully. As far as the questions without notice, I'm more than, I like them there to remain as a program, and certainly in favour of the written correspondence as to what we've been up to for the previous month. So, and also the time frame on minutes sent out for meetings. I'm more than happy to leave that as it is too. But thank you.
Couple of things. I think the prayer should be left as is, maybe not as a prayer, maybe as an oath or a pledge. It has no reference to God or religion. As Councillor Goodman said, I think it's a good, we have to remember who we were put here to represent. We're not here to represent ourselves. And I think that is a good reminder at the start of each meeting that we're here to, represent our whole communities and do the best for our whole community. So whether or not it's not called a prayer anymore, it's called an oath or a pledge. But I don't agree with the removing of that. Also, the acknowledgement to country, we only say it at every council meeting, 12 meetings a year. We don't bang on about it. I'm okay with actually removing it. However, I would agree with Councillor Goodman's sentiments that I think what's there is probably a little bit too short, sharp and shiny. Maybe we need to make it a little bit more inclusive. As far as the motions without notice, happy for those to remain in and you to use your discretion on those ones, Mayor. As we said, sometimes obviously it's not a great mechanism to use, however, I do believe it still needs to continue to stay in there. Also, the 6 days at the moment I think is working. However, I just want people to be aware that when our administration are actually doing those reports, by the time we get to here, these reports are now 2 weeks old because we are 6 days out before a meeting. They're writing him the week leading up to it. So I wouldn't suggest we go any longer. We could even go back to 5 days. But that's, you know, probably a bit of direction from the administration there as well. But I think from their sentiments and the conversations I've had is that, you know, they're preparing that week before, 6 days before it goes out. So we are, you know, there's a lot happened in those 2 weeks up until, you know, as of tonight sort of thing. So happy to either leave it as is or even maybe put it back to 5 days. I think that is about my thoughts on that one, Mayor.
Councillor Ross.
Just quickly, the prayer really should be a pledge anyhow. I haven't got too much issue with that at all. I've got no issue with, you know, potentially rewriting the Welcome to Country too. I think two sentences really short is probably a bit too short. So I'd like to see some more work around that. But some questions that I probably have is more back to you. So in regards to your discussions that you've had with people in regards to coming up with this idea, have you engaged our local members or member in regards to, you know, what, you know, is this useful for him, or is it going to be a hindrance or some sort of is it going to hurt how our standing is going to be from a state level? The reason why I say that is that we all know that the Labor government are pretty well, they're all over the Welcome to Country and things like that. We know they're quite supportive of it, but if we are we going to be hurting ourselves in going forward with future requests for finance or assistance? Is it going to be to our detriment? So these are sort of questions that I would like at least to be asked to see, to gauge what sort of, you know, support or not support that we might get, because, you know, we've had in recent times we've had talk about the sports centre, and the sports centre was basically contingent on getting, you know, 3 lots of funding, one from us, one from the Fed and one from the state. So, you know, are we going to be hurting ourselves going forward? So these are just some of the questions I would like thrashed out or sought some guidance on. In regards to, you know, rewriting, you know, is there some guidance from other mayors with what they've gone through with change, because we've seen some changes that have gone through in other councils as well. So I would probably like to see a little bit more information provided before we make any sort of decision on that sort of thing. So in regards to the other parts of the request for thought, I'm happy to leave the questions without notice, still have there as available. In regards to written reports, verbal reports, exactly as Deputy Mayor Crosling said, in regards to the time taken from some of these reports to be prepared, and also things change. There's, you know, if they're brought out 6 days before, there's be meetings in between that time too where you wouldn't have had time to provide a report. So I think allowance of a verbal report should be at least continued as well. So, but other than that, in the days leading up to it, 6 days is fine. I haven't got too much of an issue with that, but be aware that sometimes that information is a little bit outdated. So that's all.
And how do you feel about the variation to speak to the motion when it's put? You know, when if you propose a motion to speak to the motion, then at the moment within our protocol, we allow you to reserve the right to speak later to the motion, and then also to be able to close it as well. That's the situation as it stands today, and it is actually repugnant to the Act and Regs, even though you've allowed a variation before. You know, the standard set of rules are you speak to the motion, you try and garner support for the motion, hopefully someone will second it, then they speak in support, or not, as the case may be, etc. How do you feel about that?
I haven't got too much of an issue with that, how it is at the moment, to be honest. I'm happy with the maintain.
Happy with?
How we do it currently right now.
How it currently is?
Yep. Just a comment on that. I guess just with previous discussions in the chamber about perhaps elected members preempting a decision beforehand, that it is important that the mover does actually speak to it. because then that eliminates that theory and it actually then educates the entire room of what he or she is trying to. So I agree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Councillor Maguire, that a mover of a motion needs to prosecute the case for the motion, so there's an understanding in the chamber, and someone will say, I like what he's, and I agree with that, and I'll be happy to second it, instead of proposing a motion with maybe not much background, and then expecting someone to second it is, in my opinion, is inappropriate. But, you know, that's a decision that we need to make. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, Mayor Ross, just a clarification. So would the procedure be that, for example, I would stand up and say, Mayor Ross, I'd like to move a motion, and the motion is such,
Yes.
and then you would say, I'll accept that if you wish to speak to it, and I speak to it, and then we look for a second. Is that how you see it?
Correct.
I'm happy with that.
Yes. Support that. You support that, Tom?
Yeah, I support that as well. That's just from Toastmasters, that's standard meeting procedure.
Yeah.
We made the motion.
But at the moment, we have a variation that allows that not to be the case.
Yeah. Just one clarification, that if you don't speak, then you forfeit the right to, and you do get your right of reply, but you don't get an opportunity after the second to speak, so you can't stand up and speak for it. So your one-time chance is to move the motion, you accept it, right, I'll speak to the motion, looking for a seconder, get a seconder, that's it. I sit down until at the end of the discussion, if I choose to, I can close it with the right of reply.
Yeah, that's absolutely it.
I agree with that, definitely. You know, if someone chooses not to talk to the motion, they're actually going to be to the detriment of their argument, isn't it? So you've got the opportunity to talk to it, so you do it. So if you choose not to do it, well, then you're not really giving your motion the best outcome, are you? So
But the question at large here is to remove the variation that's in place within our procedure at the moment.
Well, I misinterpreted.
And so, yes, if you move a motion and wish not to speak with it, that's your prerogative. You still get an opportunity to close the debate. But that's right. We don't want people, at the moment, you can move a motion, sit on your hands. At some point, you can then stand up and make a statement around that, and then still get the opportunity to close. So we just want to get back to the...
I misinterpreted what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Just clarification, when we resume normal meeting procedure, are we going to be potentially moving these individually, not as a blanket thing? Because I just think we've all got different views.
You know, I think I
everyone
can hear your hands at this stage around that.
Okay, just clarifying that before we resume meeting procedure.
Councillor Grundy.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I think that these items should be split, and I'm inclined to want to test that motion, particularly with our prayer or pledge, or whatever you want to call it. I've got an appetite to test that here tonight.
So before I go back into meeting procedure, I will summarise, I think, what we may have agreed on. To be fair, I think we've agreed on members doing written reports to be placed in the agenda. I think we've also agreed that the regulation 12 in brackets 9 was the variation of the mover, that be removed. That's the discussion we've just had around moving motions. I'm happy to, I'm happy to withdraw the whole question around questions without notice and leave that as it is within the procedure. We've also agreed, have we not, that if a meeting goes beyond 2 hours, we'll just complete the meeting and we won't invoke 1.6. Okay. And receipt of agendas will remain at 6 clear days and 4, and in the case of the small committees, it's 3 days. I think that's what it is. Or we just leave it at 4. Yep, so it's 6 and 4. Okay. So when we go back, we're agreed on those. In its entirety.
Yes, do you want to
No. And go away to another.
present another
Yep.
version?
Yep. So given, yeah, and given that there is hard for me to say that, you know, that my short, sharp words might be a little bit brief, but given that, and also the understanding of the chamber at large, you know, perhaps we could, you know, revisit this policy and procedure in another forum, but I'll leave that up to the members to make that decision. Is there anything else before we move back into meeting procedure?
You just say we're going to delay the whole thing? No,
Well, that's what I just asked, you know, whether you'd like to deal with some parts of it, whether you'd like to deal with the things we're agreed on and leave, you know, the ones that is generally, you know, there's not, I'm in your hands. When I move back into meeting procedure, I'll be in your hands. Okay? Okay, someone, are we all happy to move back into meeting procedure? Thank you very much. I don't know whether I've still got that, I don't think. Oh, there we go. Councillor Goodman.
I would like to move a motion that Council holds a workshop to develop a pledge and acknowledgement that's representative of the Naracoorte-Lucindale Council.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I have stated my case as to why I think a pledge is important in setting the tone and intentions of our chamber at our decision-making meetings. And I've also outlined why an acknowledgement of country is an inclusive statement that brings us all together and acknowledges both our history and where we're going, the land on which we meet and the people that we represent. And I think that there's a lot of power in crafting an acknowledgement that does all of those things for our district and our chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman. I would call for a seconder. Councillor Crossley.
Question, Mayor Ross. If this motion does not succeed, am I in a position to put another motion?
Absolutely, if this motion does not succeed. Yeah.
I want to talk to
Absolutely, Councillor Ross.
I agree with the sentiment that's in the room that we need to change. I can't see why we need to be forced into making a change right now. You know, it's almost like policy on the run. We've only seen this this item in the last few days, really. Or since it came out 6 days ago. Why is it that we need to have to make a decision right now? I've got questions that I want to ask, as I just said through to you earlier. You know, I would like to hear some of the responses to that before we start actually agreeing on what a statement's going to be. So why not have a workshop? It's not hurting anyone waiting a little bit longer. If you're looking at it, it's 32 seconds is how long it takes to read the current pledge and the welcome to country. So we're getting all upset over something that takes 32 seconds, times that by 12. It's not much in the year. But the way that it's worded could have ramifications, which is I would like to know what some of the answers to my questions first. So I feel that we've probably been bullied into making a decision too quickly. So I believe a workshop is warranted.
Councillor Maguire.
Although I've stated my feelings on where I believe this should go and that I am in favour of changing Welcome to Country completely out of respect for the councillors that do want the workshop. And that's a really good case. Councillor Dennis is always quite adamant about these types of motions without actually having time to think and discuss them. So I am happy to support that motion out of respect.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Councillor Dennis.
I think we've all had our agendas for 6 days. I think the new development has given us time to consider all the ramifications, discuss it with the community, discuss it with our peers, a bit of self-analysis thrown into the blender as well, and then it's all blended up and we've brought it here tonight. So I think there's been more than adequate time to consider it. This is my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Is there any further discussion? There being none, The motion moved by Councillor Goodman, seconded Councillor Crosling, that the council holds a workshop to discuss a pledge and acknowledgement that is representative of the Narracourt Lucindale area. All those in favour? Those against? Said forever. The motion is lost. Thank you. Councillor Grundy.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I'd like to move a motion, please, which really reflects my previous comments when we were out of meeting procedure, and that is essentially that council adopt the suggested new version being, and can we repeat what it is, please? As written in the agenda.
The welcome, is that what you're relating to?
We acknowledge and respect our complex history. We welcome everyone to build our future together.
That's the welcome. Yeah.
As written in, as presented.
Yeah.
Presented in the agenda.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Dennis. Is there any further discussion?
I've got to speak against the mayor, sorry. I think we can do a little bit better than 2 sentences. I do agree, we do need a little bit of time to discuss it. That isn't representing anybody in our community as such. It is just a very brief. I think we can do better than that. I will speak against the motion, voting against it.
Of course.
Can I move a motion that we lay this on the table?
Okay.
Do I need to have a seconder now? Do I need to speak to why I think we should lay this on the table?
Formal motion. Yeah. Must be, you can move a formal motion, absolutely. It must be discussed automatically.
Formal motion that we lay this decision on the table. As a couple of councillors pointed out, you want something that represents our forefathers and the people that fought in the Anzac. That has no reference to any of that. So to sit here now and vote against, talking about it in a workshop, and then to vote for this, which doesn't actually take in what anyone just talked about, again, I don't think we should be made to be making this decision in a formal council meeting straight off the bat. When we decided our prayer and our acknowledgement to country and what we were going to do as a new council at our induction day a year and a half ago, we sat in this room and we spoke about it informally as a group. I don't think that this needs to be made here and now in an official council meeting. This could have come to SAP. This could have been a discussion that we have informally as an elected member group, and it hasn't happened, and I believe we need to lay it on the table.
Formal motion. Seconded. Councillor Ross.
Just a question. How is my motion being dealt with?
So, in fact, a formal motion takes precedence over business right now. A formal motion takes precedence right now. And so I have to take a formal motion and we have to deal with the formal motion right now. That's absolutely the LAW. And
Well, I haven't spoken. I haven't concluded.
no, the formal motion must be dealt with.
Yeah.
Yep. So in fact,
Chair, overall.
your motion now just sits there. I deal with the formal motion as it stands. The formal motion is very clear that a decision around Councillor Grundy's motion will just lay on the table. I ask all those in favour. 4. I have 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very good. Thank you. Motion is lost. Councillor Grundy's motion that the council adopt the welcome as presented in the agenda. Councillor Grundy.
Well, thank you, Mayor Ross. The beauty of these two sentences is that they capture everyone. They capture ambulance workers, forefathers, and absolutely everybody, which is what we're here about. And that wraps it up in a nutshell. You know, it's quite simple. The more simple, the less there is referring to special interest groups and that sort of thing. Once you start nominating certain people and that sort of thing, someone inevitably is going to be not mentioned and become offended, potentially. So to wrap it up in 2 sentences is the neatest and cleanest way of catering for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. Councillor Crosling.
I would just like to.
Oh, you were wrapping up, absolutely. Oh, you were, yep, closing?
Yes.
Absolutely. Closing. I apologise, Councillor Grundy. I put the motion that the council adopt the welcome as presented in the agenda. All those in favour? I have, motion is carried. Thank
Would you
you.
like to call a division, please?
Of course, division. All those who voted in favour of the motion, please stand. We have Councillor Turner, Grundy, Dennis, Ireland, Downward and Rayner. Crosling, Goodman, Maguire.
Ross.
That's it. So you should have 10. Councillor Ross, I think, Mr.
I'm Councillor Ross, sorry. So there's still more to come. Correct. Correct. So, correct. So what we've done there is we've adopted the welcome as presented in the agenda. The other pieces will have to be amended according to your wishes that we've discussed during the course of the meeting. Councillor Turner.
I'll be happy to move the other 5 items. We accept on the basis that you've withdrawn the question on notice bit, but pretty much how you articulated in your summary, I'd be happy to move that as a block of 5 items that we have general consensus. I'm not sure how you want to word that up, but I think your summary was show that there was agreement in the room to do that.
Your advice, Mr. Smurray.
Because it's a fairly contentious policy within a meeting, it would be good to have a little bit more detail from the floor in this motion, please. So what I'm asking members, because you can see the lost and carried, the formal motions that are involved, we as administration, we want you to be very clear in what you're moving. I understand what you're
I'll be
moving.
happy to move one at a time then.
Yeah. No, I can be in a block. I'm fine.
I'll move all 5 one at a time, or 4 if you wish.
Happy to have it in a block, we just have to make it clear rather than just what's.
Yeah, I understand.
So if in regard to the way that I summarised it, you might wish to take notes, that Councillor Turner move that elected members will supply written reports for the agenda.
Can I make a suggestion that,
Yes.
given that that previous motion on the welcome has been carried, so that
Yes.
the others are relatively straightforward, that to save any confusion that we present updated policy in the March council meeting
Okay.
with that change, because that's a motion of council,
Okay.
and clear up the others for adoption of the actual whole policy at March. I think that uncomplicates it. Still recognising that that motion has been carried. So you don't have to make any further decisions tonight.
I'll let Councillor Turner.
I agree.
I agree. So, Councillor Turner, you're happy
Can you just
to,
repeat that again? You're saying that the rest will just flow into the adopted policy, and we can then adopt that
At March.
right?
Yeah. Because what we generally look for is instead of doing,
yes?
bits of policy, which we've done, which is fine, but then we want a council to adopt a whole policy.
The whole document.
So we can present the updated version for endorsement at next meeting. So that still opens it up for discussion at next meeting, but that is still in there. Yep. All right.
Very good. So, Councillor Turner, you happy to move that the administration bring back the document? No, it's operational.
Just bring it back.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. We move on to 13. No, we don't. Public consultation. 13.3. Public consultation. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. This review is actually quite timely with the proposed community engagement charter and mandatory requirements for community consultation and participation due to be enacted, hopefully sooner rather than later. This new policy presented to you has obviously been formulated with the charter in mind. So it's very general, but it also references council's communication and engagement strategy to more specifically guide the council's activities in this space. Happy to take any questions, but hopefully it's self-explanatory.
Any questions for Ms. Collins? Would someone like to move that the draft public consultation and community engagement policy be adopted and then go to the public consultation? Councillor Dennis, Councillor Downwood seconds. Councillor Dennis, you happy with the wording?
Yes.
Any further discussion? I put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. 13.4, Harry Tregarth Retirement Village. Mr. McCroskey.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Essentially, this is pretty straightforward. We've had a request from the residents of the Harry Tregarth Retirement Village to install an additional or a new door into bedroom 1 to achieve a more practical approach for assisting residents in the event of emergency. We have got indicative costs there provided, but subject to council's decision tonight, if we move in that direction, I'd suggest we just get some finer tuning costings, but they should be relatively close.
Councillor Grundy.
On the face of it, according to the report, of course, option 1 looks like the most desirable based on cost. Is there anything that we're not understanding that might be more of a value versus cost in the other 2 options?
Mayor Ross. Councillor Grundy, not really. We explored 3 different options on the basis of options we had available to us. And yes, option 1 is generally the cheapest option, and we feel it's probably the most practical option. In speaking with the SAS officers and the regional manager, their recommendation was go through that section of that wall as well.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few of the residents and they're happy with the option that's listed here.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rayner. Councillor Grundy.
Well, at an appropriate time, I'm happy to move that the council go down the path or proceed with budget deliberations for option 1 as it's set out in the table.
$6,000 per unit and $36,000 approximately. Mr. McCroskey? Yep.
So we'll put that in your 24-25 budget consideration.
Happy with the wording, Councillor Grundy?
We'll probably add some wording to that about what the actual it is. Otherwise, you won't know.
As presented in the table within the agenda. In the table within the agenda. Or report.
Someone like to move to that effect?
I think
I thought you had. Councillor Grundy's moved. Did I have a seconder? Councillor Turner. Any further discussion? Being none, I'll put.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Councillor Ireland.
Excuse me, I was just going to comment that I'm assuming that $6,000 per unit is only an estimate at this time. So if that was to change, then I'm just making sure that if that ends up being $7,000 or $8,000 per unit, then that's for us to deliberate when the time comes.
Mr. McCroskey.
Yeah, Mayor Ross, Councillor, correct. At the time when we were obviously writing a report, we hadn't locked anything, so there are more indicative costs. That's exactly what the report states, that subject to when we get budget deliberations, we'll provide some fine-tuned costing. So we're hoping the initial cost that was provided, $6,000 a unit, was from a local tradesperson. However, they're subject to measure and design.
All those in favour? Carried, thank you. Lucendale Master Plan. Mr. McCroskey again.
Mayor Ross, as a result of our review of our Lucendale and Francis master plans, we provided a presentation from the consultants back in late January, and as a result of that, I believe we're in a position to endorse them tonight at the council meeting and present them to the community for public consultation. I must note that we were made aware today that there was a clash with the proposed Lucendale presentation on the 6th of March that we were proposing. We've since spoken to the consultant and she's happy to delay that for a week, and we've now set that for the 13th of March.
Would someone like to move that we release the Lucendale and Francis Master Plan for public consultation? Councillor Ireland, Councillor Turner. Any further discussion? I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Bylaws for information. Do you want to say something about that, Mr. Smith?
Not much at all. The bylaw review, fairly self-explanatory. Once every 7 years, we need to review that. It's very legal and technical. It's a very legal process that we have to get right, and fairly technical document. So I understand you all received an email to provide feedback to us, to allow us to include any your suggestions into the draft bylaws that then hopefully get endorsed at a later meeting, and then go through the public consultation, and which includes a lot of agencies, and then through the Legislative Review Council. So the bylaws, they provide council with the ability to act on issues as they arise. So, as I say, we only do them once every 7 years, so you don't want to be rewriting them every 12 months. Quite a costly exercise. From a practical approach, we have the power to act on various matters. Doesn't mean we have to, but the bylaws do give us power on various matters on council land or dogs, etc. If there are issues within the community that we do have the power to act. Council also, following the bylaws, gets the ability to set areas that it applies to, so dog areas, different things on local government lands, and you also get to set the expiation fees within that as well. So for now, it's really the process. I'd suggest there's probably not much change within there. There are some elements that we probably don't want to include, but the Legislative Review Committee have made changes to a number of other bylaws to do with public toilets, gender specific, etc., that we'll have no choice about whether you like them or not. They will actually refuse our bylaws if we don't put certain clauses in there, and they come back as we go through the process again. So that's just a practical heads up for you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. The next item on the agenda is planning and compliance. Oops, I missed something. Operations report. Operations. And that's for information. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Willsmore? No, thank you. Thank you. Any questions with Mr. Willsmore?
Just going to say that the roadside slashing, the additional roadside slashing has been very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. 43 compliance. Mr. McCroskey.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Just a quick update, the bushfire mapping update to the PDI code. We were made aware late last week that I've extended that period to the 5th of April, so the consultation period has been extended. And just towards the end of the agenda, as part of the Dog and Cat Management Act, we're required to have an animal management plan, a 5-year plan. I've provided that in the documentation for Council's endorsements tonight to go to public consultation, and essentially that should hopefully go. It meets the requirements of the Dog and Cat Management Board, which is part of the legislative requirements also.
Any questions of Mr. McCroskey? What's your role, Mr. McCroskey, in the Bushfire Hazards Overlay Code Amendment? What you represent the council in the bushfire management sphere in the southeast?
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I'm on the BMC. This is slightly different to the BMC though. It does intertwine at some point. This is more against the planning and design code. So the new bushfire management plan, the new bushfire overlays is essentially to improve and update what has currently been endorsed prior, so reflect a better expansion of certain areas within the state. So I've already provided feedback from an officer's perspective. However, they've also opened it to the general broader public, as it has significant repercussions in regards to the construction of homes and so forth.
Mr. McCroskey, and we have an actionable item around the animal management plan. That's to go out for community feedback. Would someone like to move that the draft animal management plan be released for public consultation and feedback? Councillor Grundy. Councillor Downwood second. Councillor Grundy, please.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I've noticed in there that cats are being catered for now, and the local council might have a relatively lenient approach to cats, which I have no problem with. But it begs the question, if we can be lenient with cats, could we be lenient with, for instance, working dogs when it came to pursuing them in the same way for registration fees and fines?
No. It's probably an issue that will come before council probably in the future about cat management. So while we recognise cat management, the enforcement is so much harder.
I understand.
So until I think so it's fine making rules and etc. But if you can't enforce them, So I acknowledge your comments, but probably at this point in time, the answer is probably still no. Well, and I think from a dog control perspective, so registration is not our choice, so that's legislation. But from our approach to dog issues, I think we're fairly lenient and probably educational rather than hitting people over the head with fines, etc.
Any further discussion on the motion? There being none, I put the motion.
Seconder.
Beg your pardon? Oh, seconder. Short of a seconder. Councillor Goodman, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Goodman. Any further discussion? No. All those in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Community engagement, community policy. Ms Collins?
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Nothing further to add apart from the fact that it's been a very busy and exciting month, but all good. Thank you.
Very comprehensive report, Ms Collins. Thank you. Item 15, publications, documents and information from other bodies received. Questions without notice, there being none. Motions with notice, 17.1. Councillor Grundy.
I'd like to move that and speak to it, please.
Yes.
I just wrote a few things down, which just to make it a bit more succinct. I'd like to note the following: that bank branch and ATM closures are leaving many communities without access to financial services, especially in regional Australia. Since 1975, the number of bank branches in regional Australia has fallen by more than 60%, and there are more than 1,500 communities across Australia with no bank. A large proportion of the population, including the elderly, disabled, small business and local schools and charities, will always have a need for face-to-face financial services despite advances in technology. For hundreds of communities, their only access to cash and financial services is through bank post at their community post office. Bank at post is an essential service to all communities, but is vulnerable to commercial decision-making by banks, which can choose to withdraw their participation.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. I was wondering whether this needed to just go out of meeting procedure for some period of time. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I'm open for discussion generally. I was privileged or otherwise to go to the Senate hearing last Wednesday or Thursday in Kingston, where they took evidence from various witnesses at Kingston, and it included two employees from Narracoorte and Mr. Mutton from M Electrical. The final witnesses on the day were also the General Manager of Westpac Australia, the State Manager of Westpac, and two or three other, one being their finance guy and some others. It was a really interesting discussion, and the senators, our government, our Commonwealth government, are very keen to ensure that banking is available to everyone. And in the opening remarks of the General Manager of Westpac, he said that he had 13 million customers and he had 97%, I'm not quite sure, it wasn't the happiness index, but he had 97% of his 13 million were very happy with the banking, at which point Senator Rennick said, well, that leaves 390,000 that aren't. And the 390,000 that the federal government are interested in are the ones on low income, the disenfranchised, the remote, people who live in really remote areas of Australia, and unfortunately the aged who don't get access to banking, or maybe even aren't computer literate. And the Senator kept pressing that point around banking for that minority of the population. And the banks, of course, always talk about the majority of the population and forget about the hidden few. From speaking with the senators during a break, they're very keen to see some sort of collaboration or partnership between. Is there an opportunity for community banking within where you are. For example, there are examples of community banking where they are Bendigo Bank, but there mostly are other examples, and I'm not in banking, Councillor Ross, but I'm sure you could help me. But they're also talking about the opportunity, maybe with post offices, but they also talk quite openly about opportunities with local government, where there might be a local government, presence in a town where there is no bank. It was fascinating also that the Westpac, when he was pushed, he actually suggested that they hadn't had any bank closures in the previous 5 years, and the senator asked him for the data, and they said, oh yes, well we started in this year with 113 and now we have 28. And so the senator pressed the point, have you misled the parliament? Because you cannot mislead the parliament. And so the general manager said that perhaps he misunderstood the question, most probably more appropriately. So where does this leave banking? The Westpac manager also said that they'd only close banks where there was a post office. So they knew, and Westpac Australia pay Australia Post $6,000 to every licensed post office or post office to handle their business, as an offset. And you imagine $6,000 over 52 weeks of the year is actually not a lot of money to carry out your banking. But that's not the point at all. They are still offering some sort of banking. I feel quite strongly that the marginalised people of our community need to ensure that there is a banking facility available near them, and the senators there, including which were Rennick, Colbeck and Fawcett, said that the nearest bank being 50 kilometres away wasn't close enough because it's 100 kilometres. And we have situations in this very town where businesses are taking cash and they need to deposit it, and sometimes the ATMs don't take it. And then I know, because the Westpac said that they have a policy of only allowing $7,000 to be withdrawn at a time, but if you go to a Westpac ATM, there may not be $7,000 there because it hasn't been deposited on that day. So there's no guarantee that there'll be $7,000 there if you require it within your business to carry on. So the Senate is very strong about banking and it being available, and they're very strong on the notion of community banking, whatever that may mean. And so in this particular case, Councillor Grundy's mentioning Australia Post there, but there are most of the other ways. So just for your information, I found it very interesting to actually be there and to actually have heard what I did that day. And luckily I can bring that to you as sort of just information.
You want us to stand or?
No.
No. Okay. The motion that's put there, I'm really supportive of the Senate inquiry. Banking is part of what I do, or it links into what I do. The motion probably contradicts the Senate inquiry though, because what I mean by that is that by giving the Australia Post the opportunity to have a banking licence, they're actually giving the banks an out, if that makes sense. That's my view is.
Of course, we haven't got the. I mean, sorry if I may. The Senate inquiry is ongoing. They have Western Australia to go. So
I get all that.
And if I didn't bring that to the table, you'll be none the wiser.
No, my view here is it almost gives them an out. The community bank is definitely something that is an option. And Bendigo Bank have been wanting to get in this community and a lot of other communities for quite a while. What's holding them back is the investment by the community putting into the community bank to give them confidence to come here. The beauty of the community bank too is that they actually give your community as a shareholder, and that they give money back to the community. So to me, that's a far better model to be actually investigating and actually pushing forward. this the discussion points around why they're proposing the post office is referencing to what happened in New Zealand 22 years ago. So if they're using that as their point, they're pushing. Well, banking's changed significantly in 22 years. So
Well, there's less of it.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing, because it's evolved. So I can't see how they're using that as a point of as a reason to do it. So, and actually the last part of what they're saying too, when you look at the preamble that they talk about too, is that that this will generate extra revenue that can support postal offices and the postal office network. So it's actually, there's an ulterior, there's another suggestion why they're doing it is because it's going to do that. In regards to the pitfalls, what I can see of a post office being a bank is that the government's endorsed this. They've had access to this previously. Through the government's had state banks, Commonwealth banks. They've been in that banking space. To go and reinvent the wheel and go back to the future again, I can't see how it's plausible, to be honest. In regards to a bank providing business and personal lending, you're not going to have a lender sitting at Lucindale or someone sitting at Pathway. So it's hard enough trying to find those staff now to fill the roles in the banks, so let alone how the post office is going to find it. I just can't see how it's going to work that way.
Perhaps we're not sure what the model actually is.
I know, but this is what it's saying is the point. I'm talking to what's actually in that motion there. So in regards to what does it offer at the moment, if people still want to do deposits, they can still do deposits at the post office. It's not stopping that from occurring. If they still want to pay their utility bills, they can still do that as well through the post office. So having a banking licence is not going to stop that at all. So, in regards to, a model going forward, I can see that contradicting what the Senate outcome is, that motion. And I would be really, from a community perspective, pushing the community model, pushing the Bendigo Bank, because it's a far better proposition.
I just add at that point, Councillor Ross, that for the information of members, to set up a community bank like Bendigo, they want 100 million. They want 100 million. If you can find a community with 100 million worth of deposits, you get a community bank.
Can I also add to that too, though, is that the reason why the big banks are pulling out is because their reliance on the cash deposit raising isn't as important. It's important to them because ultimately a bank will try to raise capital through deposits to then lend out. It's not as important to them because they can buy it on the open market cheaper. But the second tier lenders like your credit unions and your Bendigo banks, that's really important for them because that's how they raise their capital. It's cheaper for them to do that. So the credit unions are the ones you need to be encouraging as well. So the beauty of it is that banking is evolving. There's going to be less bankers. There's going to be more people out there doing alternative banking, and that is brokers are going to be more prevalent going forward. The prevalence of a credit union and a secondary bank like a Bendigo bank or a community bank is the answer. So,
thanks, Councillor Ross. Councillor Goodman.
I understand, and my preference would be that there'd be community banks that would service everywhere as well. But I'm concerned, as the Mayor said, about the amount of capital that's required to set those up. And as I see it, the beauty of what's being presented here is that there's then banking availability for the communities of Lucindale and Francis without having to come to Narracoorte to do all the centralised banking. So I feel like this offers a lot more flexibility for our smaller communities. That means that they don't have to take an hour out of their day to drive to get to a bank to undertake these kind of activities. So that's why I think this is a attractive proposition without wanting to second guess outcomes of Senate inquiries.
Councillor Rayner.
I think we should be supporting it because that wasn't long ago that the post office would look like closing. And since we've had online purchasing, they are just booming. So another feather in their cap would be good.
Councillor Crosland.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but isn't bank at post a thing already?
is they're already transactional.
So as one of the submissions, I've read through quite a few submissions that have been put to the Senate inquiry, and the Commonwealth Bank actually state, in areas we've closed a branch, customers who prefer over-the-counter service continue to have nearby access and face-to-face banking service via their local Australia Post Bank at Post outlet. It's a 110-year partnership. It's recently been extended to 2032. It actually states here that customers, regional, rural, remote, have access to cash transactions. They can do passport transactions, personal cheque deposits, cash deposits, withdrawals, account balances, inquiries, and credit card repayments. And for small business customers, include cash, cheque, and coin deposits, all at Bank at Post already currently. I don't think anyone in this room is an expert on legislation, and I certainly am not. So I do not agree with supporting a bill that I don't think anyone in this room actually fully understand. I do support that the council writes to support the Senate inquiry into regional closures into bank inquiry into bank closures into regional Australia, and also supporting any form of community banking in regional Australia. I don't think it has to be this one and only option. There's clearly there's options on the table, as the Mayor has stated. So I don't agree. But the Australian Citizens Party say this won't stop bank branches closing down, as stated by them. So this isn't going to be in competition to the banks. It's not going to make the banks stay open, as Commonwealth Bank have clearly stated in their submission. They've closed branches when they know they've got a bank at Post at a local post office, which I believe every bank has signed on to besides the ANZ. So everyone here, if you need to do any of your banking, can actually do it at the Post already. And I don't think 21 councils out of 537 is a great uptake on the Australian Citizens Party bill. But like I said, I'm not going to support a bill that I don't fully understand. But I would support the council writing a letter that we support the Senate inquiry.
Thank you.
Look, for what it's worth, I've got a few remarks to make when we go back into meeting procedure. But the subtlety that may have been lost is that the current arrangement is at the discretion of the banks. What we're talking about is trying to set up a situation where post offices, which are for all intents and purposes in all locations, provide a service which is guaranteed by the federal government, Commonwealth government. That's what's being missed in this discussion, I think. So I'll just table that.
Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, Mayor Ross, if I can just add to Councillor Crosland's comments there. I just know that, and I won't mention who I'm banking with, but I do know they will accept cheques to deposit there, which is a great relief for me at the post office, because prior to that I was in trouble. But there's no cash transaction that I can do through the post office with the particular bank that I'm with. And I don't know the model that is going to end up coming out the other, or may possibly come out the other end of this, but we don't know whether it'll be every post office either. We've got no idea, but it's whether we want to encourage this model to fruition.
If there's no further discussion, I'll ask that we move back into meeting procedure. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. Very good. So if you just scroll down just to bring me back to where we are. I have a motion. Do we have one or two motions here?
Two parts to one motion.
Two parts to one motion.
And I'd like to close it at the appropriate stage if any.
We need a seconder and a bit of discussion first.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rayner, thank you. Councillor Ireland. Have you just closed the discussion?
No, I'd like to close it.
Councillor Ireland.
May I speak? I just thought I'd add that with the withdrawal of face-to-face bank services continuing in townships across the country, this appears to be a lifesaver. And I'm obviously speaking in favour of the motion, and I think it's a little bit like we've all stood around and looked at what's happened with the telecommunications network. It's all right to be satisfying 97% of the population. It's the 3% we've got to look at trying to sort things out for.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Grundy, if you'd close.
I wouldn't usually pursue a matter which is outside of our jurisdiction. However, I believe this matter affects all of us directly and we can play a role in advocacy. I believe the Commonwealth Government-backed Post Office Bank will benefit all Australians, particularly regional and isolated Australians. If we accept the evidence as set out in our communication that the New Zealand experience suggests this concept has played a key role in better servicing its customers and has led to a reduction in bank closures. If we look locally in the southeast, we're seeing banks close branches and reduce opening hours considerably. Retailers rely on proper banking services in order for them to trade. Our big four banks in Australia enjoy some of the most generous regulatory frameworks in the world, including can't-fail banking assistance and government guaranteed deposits, which facilitates fantastic profits, all provided by the Australian people by way of the federal government. I believe that banks have a moral obligation or a social contract to provide proper service in return to the Australian people. In any event, if the New Zealand experience can be reflected here and our residents are better off, then I suggest we do everything possible to see the Post Office Bank or any other entity with an associated business model succeed by supporting this motion tonight. I note that the sitting inquiry met in Kingston last week where the Kingston CEO spoke and is very concerned about the lack of banking services at Kingston. Are we next? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grundy. All those in favour? 6. Motion's carried. Thank you. Questions without notice? Motions without notice. I'd be prepared to take a motion without notice that the council write a letter in support of the Senate inquiry. Councillor Crosling? Councillor Crosling moved. Councillor Ross second. Any need for discussion on that? There being none, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 20.1 is the CEO's annual performance and remuneration review, and we will move into confidential meeting.